Listen, y'all, the Ravens lost against the Bengals. It revealed a glaring issue with our Baltimore Ravens, okay? And we've heard this before, we've heard this issue before, but I think honestly, me revealing it is going to be kind of an aha for us all because I don't think we're thinking about it because it's not necessarily offensive line, it's not Lamar Jackson's confidence, right? It's not the fact that Lamar Jackson could be washed or some sort of ridiculousness like that. It's something we've talked about before plenty of times, and we need to talk about it again. So let's talk about it right here on the Be More Show. Get your popcorn, get your drink. Let's have a conversation. All right, let's do it. Look, this is the Be More Show. All right, y'all, look, welcome in to the Be More Show. I'm your host, DJ, back once again. Look, we got to talk about these Baltimore Ravens, unfortunately, against the Cincinnati Bengals, where it felt like Joe Burrow, turf toe injury, toe surgery, switching out shoes, don't matter. No T. Higgins, which typically would be an issue for Cincinnati, no problem. Cincinnati worst ranked defense, maybe in history. Let's just give them five turnovers. No problem. Let's talk. Look, so the Baltimore Ravens lost this game 32-14 against the Cincinnati Bengals. 14 points against the team that historically probably has the one of the worst defenses of all time. I think I saw something out there that said I'm gonna put a pin in that for a second because that's my main point. But I was flabbergasted watching this game, and it's funny because the Ravens have gotten a lot of Panthers comparisons this year in the way they played and kind of the up and down nature that they've kind of been on, and I feel like this was a very Panthers way to lose a game. Sorry, Brodney, right? This was a very Panthers way to lose a game. 5 turnovers against one of the worst defenses in the league, one of the worst defenses historically. 5 turnovers. 2 fumbles by Lamar, if I'm not mistaken, 2 fumbles by Likely, and an interception at the worst possible times. I mean, we're talking about a fumble at the goal line by Isaiah Likely. We're talking about a fumble in your own territory that sets the Bengals up with goal to go. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first 2 turnovers only ended up with like 6 points for the Bengals, right? 9 points for the Bengals. So the defense deserves a little bit of credit, if we're going to be honest, right? If we're going to be honest, the defense deserves a lot of credit for a defense we have questioned and gotten upset about. Now they get. Don't get me wrong, they gave up some points when you kind of needed them to step up a little bit more. But early on in this game, I mean, couldn't be too upset. But I will say this. This was disheartening. It was frustrating. Sometimes the losses like this, and I think this is kind of the unfortunate part of about social media, right? Because losses like this make you want to like throw in the towel, be so upset, be mad. There's probably 1% of teams, maybe even less than that go undefeated throughout the season, right? I wonder what that percentage is for real. But 1% of teams, less than 1% of teams go undefeated. So like losses happen, bad losses happen. There's no team dominating anybody except for maybe the Patriots. And like we talked about before, the jury's still out on whether the Patriots are great or bad or good or decent or the top of the AFC. Like the jury's still out on that, right? The jury's still out on what they do when playoff time comes, right? The jury's still out on that. So in that conversation, right, what's going on with the Ravens, right? I got to ask y'all a question. Let me know that below. What's going on? What's going on with the Baltimore Ravens? Because watching this game, it's like, well, obviously, 5 turnovers. You can't lose a turnover battle by that. I mean, you can't lose a turnover battle in the NFL, rarely ever, but you can't lose a turnover battle by that much and expect to win the game. 5 turnovers, and when they happened, just awful, y'all. Just terrible. 5 turnovers when they happen, just awful. But here's my question. When turnovers happen, takeaways happen, how did the Ravens respond? Well, in this game in particular, they responded with more turnovers. Begs the question, like we said before, what is the Ravens' problem? I think it's a problem that we've seen before. Like I said, it's not that Lamar Jackson is washed or cooked or he can't run anymore or even that he's injured. I don't think it's that. I don't think it's the biggest problem. Could be the latter of those in terms of possible injury not being 100% could be part of it. It's not necessarily, offensive line, even though I think within the folds of what's going on, I think it's part of it. I think it's this, and it's not lack of identity, but it is lack of sticking to a certain identity. And the reason I say that, this happens with the Ravens in the playoffs. This happens with the Ravens when they get down early in games. I don't know what it is about that Colts game where the Ravens played the Colts and they made this big comeback, but they need to watch that film at least once a week because the Ravens have more of these type of games where they get down and they just dig themselves into more of a hole, right? I mean, if we want to have a conversation, let's talk about last year. We talk about illy timed mistakes. Mark Andrews on the goal line, Mark Andrews on the goal line with a chance to tie the game, right? Mark Andrews trying to make a move, right? A couple years ago, Zay Flowers trying to get to the end zone. Not to mention some of the other Lamar Jackson turnovers that have been woven in to some of these playoff losses specifically. And I really feel like the biggest problem with the Baltimore Ravens right now is that when they get punched in the mouth, they have no counterpunch. And if they do, it's almost like, I don't want to say this, but it's almost like, look, sometimes you get punched in the mouth and you just aggressive and you strike back. So you get the lucky shot on them. But I think that's part of the Ravens' problem right now. Part of the Ravens' problem right now is they have no counterpunch. If the Ravens get punched in the mouth, if the Ravens even by self-inflicted wounds, if the Ravens make a mistake, the Ravens do not know how to come back from it. Now, I think that goes to leadership. I think we can have that conversation. I think that goes to leadership. I think that could be a John Harbaugh problem, right? Where John Harbaugh is not like, all right, you want to talk about motivational speaking, and this, that, and the third. Where is John Harbaugh in these moments, right? We need a wired extended because where is John Harbaugh in the moments of time when there's an interception thrown, there's a turnover, this, that, and the third? Where's John Harbaugh, right? But also it comes down to the players as well. The players have to execute, right? I can't blame turnovers. I can't blame the actual act of turning the football over on the coach. I can't blame the actual act of a bad penalty on the coach. But what I can do is I can blame the coach for you not getting up out of it, right? It's kind of interesting. I feel like the Ravens kind of, it just seems like it's a common thread. It's a common issue with the Baltimore Ravens, right? And I get it. All y'all probably like, I knew, I felt that way too. I just didn't know how to say it, right? I felt that way too. I just maybe I said it on my channel, right? I already said it, but I feel like the Ravens have to develop a counterpunch, right? The Ravens have to develop a counterpunch, and it feels like, especially when the Ravens are favored. Especially in these games where the Ravens really have no business of losing, especially in these games where the Ravens turn the football over, that seems to be the time when the Ravens can't come back from it. Like, because let's be honest, if I'm not mistaken, and I might be, but I'm almost certain that off of the 3 turnovers that the Ravens had early in this game, I'm almost certain that the Bengals only scored 6 to 9 points off of it. So you're right back in the game, right? But like when I say the Ravens have no counterpunch, and when I say their biggest issue is not the fact that they don't have an identity, it's the fact that they don't stick to what brought them to the dance. The Ravens don't stick to what brought them to the dance, right? The Ravens are one of the best rushing teams in NFL history, right? Since Lamar Jackson came into the league. This year has been a little bit kind of but for the most part, the Ravens have been a historically good rushing team. And I think part of the problem to why there's one team that looks like they're a dynasty, and honestly, there's probably about two teams that have won Super Bowl since within that team, and there's probably 4 or 5 teams that are there every single year that are consistent, right? But the reason why there's one team that rises above the rest and everybody else is kind of like a here, a there, everywhere is because of that point. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to stick to their identity. It does not matter how the game is being played. The Kansas City Chiefs stick to their identity. The Ravens don't do that. And when we see these losses, a lot of times, I talked about it before, there was a reason why 30 rushes, right? 30 rushes was a big part of what the Ravens had to do to win these games, right? There was a reason why 30 because the Ravens lean on the run game, and what happens is that makes your passing game easier, right? We're starting to see once again, and I'm not trying to downplay our guys, but we're starting to see once again that without this run game, maybe our receivers aren't as good as we thought they were. And I'm as big enough to blame as anybody, right? Because Rashad Bateman has been silent. Can we have that conversation? Zay Flowers has not been nearly as good without that excellent run game, without Lamar Jackson's ability to escape as much this year with certain injuries going on, right? We can talk about crucial mistakes. Tez Walker, a couple of big drops in this game, right? So what do you do in those situations? And I think that's what the Ravens have to figure out. Let me know down below what you guys think, y'all. What do the Ravens do in those situations, in those big situations where it's like, hey, look, y'all, we're not playing well. We got to figure it out. Because when you look at it, 22 carries all told. First off, that's not 30. I'm sorry. I think they need 25 to 30 every single game. And that's probably not even counting what Lamar Jackson does in the run game. That's just me. I mean, Derrick Henry's averaging 6 yards a carry, and you don't give him the football. And everybody's confused. So I think this is the biggest problem with the Baltimore Ravens right now. When the time comes, when it comes down to brass tacks, instead of leaning back into what you know, leaning back into what got you there, leaning back into what made you successful, instead, you do the complete opposite. And this has nothing to do with run versus pass either, right? But, it does, but to a certain degree, because I feel like sometimes people will run versus pass, Lamar came himself, like, that's irrelevant, right? Whether Lamar needs to throw the ball 30, 40, 50 times is irrelevant. The real thing is you need to run the football. Your offensive line is built on running the football. Your passing game is built on running the football. The success of your offensive line is built on running the football. It seems like, to me, your receivers getting open is predicated on running the football. That's just what it seems like to me. That's just what it seems like to me, y'all. What do y'all think down below? Let me know. Let me know what y'all think down below, y'all. Because I feel like this is a problem. I feel like this is the problem. I feel like this is the problem with the Baltimore Ravens. I feel like this is the problem with the Baltimore Ravens and specifically the playoffs, right? But we've seen it a little more in the regular season over the past couple of years. When it comes down to brass tacks, this team does not lean into what makes them special. This team, and once again, this is why I can go back and harp on coaching. I'm planning something about, doing a video about John Harbaugh and whether or not he's a good coach or a bad coach, right? Which I know a lot of us already have our answers, but I'm curious just from a technical standpoint, outside of my opinion, but just from a technical standpoint, I'm curious to see what I come up with. But I do want to say this. this goes back to coaching, right? Your identity, right? You sticking to said identity, knowing how many times people rush the football, knowing how many times a guy stays on the field. I mean, I know technically Derrick Henry had the most carries, but I think snap count wise, for some reason, Rasheen Ali ended up being higher in the snap count. I don't, out of all of our backs, I don't get that. I don't understand that. Like, maybe he's a better pass protector than Keaton Mitchell, but I don't get it, right? I don't get it. Obviously, there's not a lot of protecting going on anyway. So I don't get it, but I think that's the problem, right? I think that's the problem with the Baltimore Ravens right now. I think the Baltimore Ravens lack of consistent identity, right? When I say consistent identity, sticking to said identity, I think that's the problem. I really do, because we've seen it time and time again. Why did the run game dry up? Even with Gus Edwards, even with J.K. Dobbins, right? Even with a Melvin Gordon and guys like that. Right? Why did the run game dry up? Why didn't we stick to the run game? Right? Now you got a Hall of Fame running back, and you don't want to lean into him to make this offense easier for your guys. I don't get it. I simply don't get it. Because I feel like because the run game has kind of been taken out of this offense, and sometimes it's by choice. And not by a good choice, just by choice, right? It's because of the Ravens controlling what plays, Todd Monken controlling what plays get called. I think when that happens, I think a lot of things dry up. I feel like we haven't seen nearly as good of a Mark Andrews as we're used to seeing, right? I think, I think it's become a little bit predictable what the Ravens are going to do, right? How the Ravens are going to respond. And the Ravens have to figure out. I mean, they need to watch the Colts game on repeat and butt it up to a game like this, right? Butt it up to a game like the Lions early on in the season. When it's not working, and even if that is the run game, even if the run game isn't working, Derrick Henry averaging 6 yards a carry, Keaton Mitchell averaging 9 yards a carry, even Rasheen Ali averaging 4.3 yards a carry. It was working. What happened? Now I know some turnovers happened. I get that, but what went down here? What went wrong? I gotta know. Let me know down below what y'all think, y'all. Maybe I'll extend this out a little bit more later on, but I just want to throw that out there because I feel like that's one of the Ravens' biggest problems right now. One of the Ravens' biggest problems right now is the fact that they don't lean on what they do. It's funny. We've been credited as the team that zags when everybody zigs or zigs when everybody zags, but then we don't lean into that uniqueness. We start to become what everybody else is instead of being our own team. I don't get that. I don't understand that. If the Ravens can figure that out, I think we'll be surprised at what happens. But look, y'all, I got to get up out of here. Definitely hope you guys enjoy the show. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Let me know down below what you guys think about the topic. And if you think, is this the biggest problem with the Baltimore Ravens? Or is there something I'm just not seeing? Let me know down below. Look, y'all, this has been the Be More Show. Until next time, my friends.